Welcome to SVCH Talks, where innovation meets inspiration and every conversation sparks transformation. Here we unlock the future, share cutting edge insights, and empower you to lead the way in a world driven by knowledge and discovery. Let's elevate together because the next breakthrough starts here.
We're thrilled to have you join us for a day filled with insightful discussions, groundbreaking innovation, and transformative learning. Today, you'll have the unique opportunity to hear from industry leaders as they share their expertise, experiences, and best practices. Before we move forward, remember that you can obtain the micro-credential for this event. Just follow the instructions on our website. Don't miss this chance to certify your participation and learning. Now we're ready to start. Let's dive into the broadcast that our team has prepared for you. Enjoy it.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to this amazing session, this webinar with Dr. Andrea Thomas. How are you, Andrea? I will introduce you, but I just want to see how are you?
I'm doing great, Alejandro. It's great to be here with you for this webinar, but it's also great that here we are at the end of this year collaborating to bring in the new year well. So I'm excited to be here. Thanks.
That's true. Actually, we are closing this year where we have great webinars at Silicon Valley Certification Hub, and you are the closure, like the last one conversation to end it really well the year.
Yeah, it's saved the best for last. I'm all for it.
Totally. So for those you haven't heard about Andrea, she is like just amazing. So she's a leader whose work sits at the intersection between culture, among culture, technology, human connection, and over the past 2 decades, she has worked across 6 continents with educators, institutions, global organizations to design learning experiences that build trust, expand access, and help leaders that everybody who is here in this event to navigate an increasingly interconnected world. So, overall, her global experience deeply shaped her approach to leadership, her ability to think systematically, lead with intention, and design solutions that are both strategic and human centered. So actually today Andrea is working responsible AI, and global collaboration is driven by a clear purpose, creating conditions for meaningful connections, shared progress, and a more bright and peaceful future. So, welcome, Andrea. Um, you will introduce yourself and the presentation. She has an amazing presentation. By the way, she was recently presenting a TED Talk. By the way, how was it? How was that TED Talk?
It was fantastic. I couldn't have asked for a better outcome. And I'm very grateful for the opportunity to do that TED Talk. Just to recap that TED Talk, the name of the title was What Artificial Intelligence Can Tell Us About Humanity. And you can check it out on YouTube.
Nice. We will share in across our social media as well. But yeah, happy to see what you have for today about cultural intelligence and artificial intelligence leadership.
Thank you so much, Alejandro. I think this is a discussion that really needs to be had. And earlier this year, Alejandro and Daniel invited me to contribute to the Chief AI Officer program or the training course at Silicon Valley Certification Hub with the intent to talk about all of the criteria that's needed for executives to be able to uh, provide opportunities for digital transformation at their organization. And I think one of the things that we talk about in business is obviously organizational culture, but perhaps people don't understand exactly where the intersection between artificial intelligence and culture comes into play. But that's a very significant perspective that really needs to be discussed. And so in today's session, Master, Cultural Intelligence for AI Leadership, well, let's be honest, we're not going to master anything today, but we're going to have the infrastructure or perhaps the roadmap on what it would take to master cultural intelligence for artificial intelligence leadership. And so what we'll be talking about pretty much is what CQ is, just a teaser about it, as well as, what this means in the larger context. So I'm not going to make the broad assumption that everybody who is watching this really truly understands, what artificial intelligence is. And so for the context of this conversation, what we're going to talk about is artificial intelligence as a database of information with context-driven content that produces outcomes, right? And so basically, in short, it is something that was artificially created to adapt, a system that adapts based on the context that we put into it. And so there are, to date, more than 22 kinds of artificial intelligences, and there are estimated to be hundreds more, in production. And don't quote me on those exact statistics, because I'm sure this has changed so many times that, I could be wrong. So I don't want to, I don't want to get called out for inaccurate information. So again, the ability to adapt. And so where does that come in with culture? Cultural intelligence, what does that mean, right? So cultural intelligence is pretty much the ability to adapt to a cultural and contextual situation, giving us the opportunity to make decisions and choices that influence our organization properly. And so I am going to pull up, I prepared, a small little bit of information that we can talk about on that today. So Master Cultural Intelligence for AI Leadership. I really wish I could see all of you, only because I'd say, if you can see my screen, give me a thumbs up. Alejandro, if you're still there, let me know if you can see my screen.
Yeah, I can see it. By the way, to all the audience, we are live. So if you have any question or comment, please write it down in the platform that you are using, like YouTube, LinkedIn, Instagram, and so on. And we will have time during the conversation and at the end to answer those questions. The stage is yours, Andrea.
Thank you so much. All right. As Alejandro so wonderfully mentioned, I am Dr. Andrea Thomas. I'm the president of AET Global LLC, also the CEO of The Common Place, where I create custom learning opportunities for educators, for executives in education to be able to learn practical skills and tools to create international peer collaborations effectively and learn other odds and ends we can get into. I'm grateful to have partnered with Purdue University, American Councils, the American Council on Education, the United Nations, USC, the SUNY Coil Center, JMU, and so many more. Thank you so much for these partnerships. And of course, the latest Silicon Valley Certification Hub. And so by the end of this session, you're going to learn about CQ as a framework with the intention to build trust within community partnerships and collaborations. So I put here educational collaborations because that's typically my jam. But it also matters, in our organizational discussions, what that should look like, right? So cultural intelligence refers to the capability to function effectively across various cultural contexts, including understanding, interpreting, and responding appropriately to cultural differences. And so I know this is controversial where, sometimes we're like, this person said something that offended me, or I don't understand what happened, or, I feel angry because somebody said something to me that was inappropriate. But really, I think if we can assume best intent, we can find the roadmap to create solutions. So when we're talking about transformation, we're talking about change management. And with that can come bottlenecks, disagreements, and also gaps, particularly in knowledge needs, right? So if we focus on those knowledge needs, the first is, well, what is artificial intelligence? And we've already established that, right? It's a database of information with the ability to adapt. All right, great. And what is our organizational culture telling us? All right, insert mission statement here. And then start thinking to yourself, well, what does artificial intelligence mean within our organizational context? And what does artificial intelligence mean in what we want to produce in terms of our outcomes? Do we have an ethical mindset in relation to what we can produce on that? Are we interested in creating kind of chat GPT, generated content that has absolutely no personality or spirit or soul to it? Just, I want to make money. And so that would be something that's maybe a value is speed, right? I think a lot of organizations, a lot of companies value speed because speed can, generate dollars. If you're the first person to, make the decision, then you can produce something that can potentially generate money. And this is a competitive mindset mentality. Okay, so what I want to highlight there is from that organizational cultural standpoint, you have a value that has been identified as speed, right? So this is a time value. And so in cultural intelligence, there are these 14 different values where we can look at to ensure that we can find the way of where we have the happy medium, which I like to call the common place, where we meet and make agreement with each other in order to make decisions that help us progress instead of bottleneck our activities in relation to our digital transformation and change management. So again, this cultural intelligence refers to the capability to function effectively across various cultural contexts, including understanding, interpreting, and responding appropriately to differences, right? It says cultural differences, but let's just say differences because we're talking about an organizational context, but we're also talking about our human context. So by fine-tuning this skill, you can navigate the complexities with ease and ultimately foster meaningful connections and successful collaborations with individuals from all walks of life. But what does that mean in the context of artificial intelligence? Isn't it just some robot that produces, an outcome based on my command? Sure, something like that. But the truth is, artificial intelligence has been designed. It's been designed by humans. It's been designed by a specific set of humans who get to be in the rooms where these designs are happening. And that's not to say that's good or bad. It's just to say that we don't know what we don't know. And so artificial intelligence and these databases of information have their limitations, but they also have biases. And so biases, I think this year has become a bit of a word that is delicate, but the truth is, it just means that there is a perception that happens that creates an outcome that's in favor of one or the other, right? And so there's information in relation to these databases that uses profiling to help people make decisions on how to target you for marketing opportunities. And we've become so accustomed to having ad focused or focused content to our desired outcome, right? That we don't even pay much attention to this from the fine-tuning organizational standpoint of what these AI-driven, AI-mediated content is. So if we can put in that perspective of AI-mediated context, then we can start to think about, okay, well, great. I need some strategy here. I need that strategy to be organizational strategy. I need that strategy to be a nuanced strategy for how I want to engage with people. I desire to have this outcome, in which case I need to put those CQ elements within that preferred outcome, right? So by learning these tools with CQ, you're able to identify maybe the context and the content in which you want to either produce a successful outcome for your digital transformation initiatives or interact better with people on your team. And Lord knows we all need some good, healthy ways for us to convene and to relate with each other and to connect with each other. And that's certainly, something that I value very greatly. Peaceful productivity. That's something that came up for me recently in another endeavor I had the opportunity to belong to. And so here is an empty chair, and I'd like for you to envision, as your key stakeholder population who sits in this chair. What do they need to know? Where are they from? What do they value? What do they need? So perhaps our key stakeholder population is somebody between the ages of 60 to 80. What might they need to know about artificial intelligence in order for me to best serve them in my capacity as a leader? I think a lot of times we talk about who we serve from a generational and generalized context, or in the CQ terms, kind of cultural general, but these generalized contexts where we create these assumptions that we have on how to meet a key stakeholder population need. But it's important to consider who's in this chair, because that's going to help you design what you need for user experience. That's going to help you decide who needs to have the skills and tools to create policy, who needs to have some training and professional development in order to facilitate an outcome from a human resources standpoint. What are the legalities of utilizing this type of information and data in order to produce outcomes for legal aspects? And there isn't a place where artificial intelligence isn't shifting the landscape of the work that we get to do every single day. And so by focusing on who this person is in this chair as your key stakeholder population, you can more effectively design solutions, and also speed up your innovations if that's something of value to you, in order to be able to use artificial intelligence effectively within your organization, within your life. One of the things I like to add is creating space for joy, because I think, one of the things that we do as well is focus on, kind of peaceful productivity. And so I think the value proposition of what artificial intelligence offers, again, going back to that time value of speed, is the ability to adapt, the ability to create the space to do something that's more enjoyable for us, or to create the space to press the oil, to produce faster, to work harder for the AI system and not for the human, but also to have people who are engaging with these systems have the confidence, the competence, the ability to connect, and the community. Because the community is one of the most important elements of what's going to drive these systems going forward. It's also a risk in an AI mediated society, where these algorithms that are producing outcomes are producing information in context where people are being kind of siphoned off into different communities that meet their best felt need, their interests, and their values, and perpetuating that based on clicks and other ideas that allow people to engage with each other based on these specific set of criteria, right? So community, how do we continue to be collegial? How do we continue to have community when we're focused on trying to make sure that we produce outcomes, right? So I like creating space for joy, confidence, competence, connecting, and community. So I want to go back here to the evolution of artificial intelligence, primarily because I just want to make sure that people understand that this is not new. This is not something that just showed up one day, as people like to suggest, right? They're like, oh my gosh, and then ChatGPT came along and my life changed. Be that as it may, artificial intelligence was something that was designed by ancient philosophers, or conceptualized by ancient philosophers. And over time, all of this information that has been collected over time has been put into these databases. There's a lot that can be said about that, but for the interest of time, I just wanted to talk about this as not something that was created yesterday. It's been in development for a very long time, including in the 1950s, when they first created the Turing test that was going to allow a computer to be recognized first for its human capabilities. And we've made significant progress with that over time, to the point where I last checked, and I'm sure that has changed since then, because I think I saw a different metric. But to the last point I checked, it was 70% human. You can't decipher whether or not it's a computer or a human. I'm sure that since that metric has come about, that has changed, because we are continuously improving. So I just wanted to share a little bit of that evolution over time. And so for the sake of the community conversation, I want to go back to kind of these interconnected nodes or neurons, which is a neural network. That's kind of how we think when we work together in these ecosystems, right? Ecosystems, our communities are ecosystems, our organizations are ecosystems. And what is going to make that thrive well? These neural networks are something that take place within our body. And so if we reconceptualize a human being, right, from these, first conceptualized beings of artificial intelligence, then we have to conceptualize what the parts of artificial intelligence are that we want to produce an outcome within our organization, right? As I mentioned, there's the legal compliance part, there's the ethics and policy part, there's the human resources capacity part, right? And so interconnected nodes or neurons in a layered structure that resemble the human brain, similar to this, right? So what are the elements? What are the connections over time that help us to produce these outcomes? How do we connect the dots, which is a really important part, right? And I think those cultural elements, not even I think, those cultural elements, those cultural values, those points of perspective help us to connect the dots in order to effectively meet areas within our organization and within our community that we don't necessarily know how to meet. And again, I go back to these ecosystems, a complex network or interconnected system, right? So some examples of ecosystems is a natural ecosystem. Outside, the sun shines, it rains, and then we have what we need for healthy plant life. I had the opportunity to attend the Digital at UNGA yesterday, which is in collaboration with the International Telecommunications Union, which is a United Nations organization. And so the United Nations itself is an ecosystem. It has 77 agencies that were created with the intent for collaboration at the time of deep polarization within the world in 1945 and 1946. And so I like to look at that as a healthy set of organizations that have learned to bring people together for these very specific thematic areas that allow people to work together effectively. And then we have our digital ecosystems, which are our connected devices, our connected applications, our connected elements that help us create outcomes and opportunities, similar to how we're streaming here online. And so these neural networks and ecosystems are made up of interconnected parts that interact with each other, and they can adapt to changes in their surroundings. And they often have hierarchical structures. We can certainly talk more about that at another time. In any case, I want to thank you so much, Alejandro, for giving me the platform to be able to share just a small taste of, kind of what we can talk about here with cultural intelligence. But I think the main takeaway right here is how we adapt for our leadership styles in the time where we're doing digital transformation initiatives and when we're looking to understand from an institutional standpoint, where do we begin when we're looking to drive artificial intelligence within our organization, within our capacity as our company changes and evolves? But also, what are those elements that I need to know that I don't know because I have blind spots, and so does AI. So thank you so much for the platform. And I'm sure there's so much more that we can talk about. And I look forward to continuing this conversation.
Thank you so much, Andrea. I really love, in general, your presentation, but also the concept of cultural intelligence that is really relevant. Like everybody is talking about artificial intelligence, but few and just experts like yourself are paying strong attention, like paying attention to cultural intelligence. So really, really nice.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you. There's a lot more to say. And I certainly look forward to the opportunity to share with everybody, in these executive education programs that you have through Silicon Valley Certification Hub, but of course, as well, in modules that we'll be producing in the new year.
Yeah, for sure. So don't forget to follow Andrea Thomas across her socials. If you want like consultancy of how to deploy AI in an ethical way, how to work with your teams, how to use AI for building a strong um, company with culture, with the right cultural intelligence. Andrea is a right one.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you.
And so if you have some questions, like please write it down. But so far, while everybody is writing, I have a couple of questions that maybe that could open the discussion. So you talk about like how relevant is cultural intelligence, but how do you see that this cultural intelligence will become more critical while uh, the companies are growing and growing? So it's more difficult, maybe at scale, in huge corporations, to think or to organize this in the right way. So, how do you see the challenges between those small, medium companies of how to work on it versus those that are big and or have are scaling fast?
Mm. I mean, that's an excellent question. And I think, you know, first, let's say this, it's our ability to adapt, right? It's our human intelligence and all of the divinely given parts, that's the way I choose to call it, that we have, that are the beautiful points, I think, that make us unique and offer different values and different perspectives into the way we get work done, right? And so here's the thing about small companies. I mean, small can be a good thing, but also small can create insular mindsets on how we best produce an outcome. For example, in certain classrooms and global education initiatives and virtual exchanges, which I've had the opportunity to do, um, not every perspective can be at the table. So how can we create the opportunity for people to come to that table, right? To be able to connect, to talk, and to explore ideas. So if you have a small company that's maybe a lean team, well, in one way, you might be thinking about, how do I serve a demographic that is beyond my understanding? You might use artificial intelligence to identify the context and the cultural strategy for how to meet those individuals where they are. You might also consider, what don't I know and how do I explore this without minimizing this, right? Because a lot of times, and especially when we have these kind of AI systems that have been created by the global north, big tech companies that have certain agendas, some of the concerns have been around digital colonialism, and I remember the first time I heard that, I was like, what? Digital colonialism, right? There is no one right way to do something. And so I emphasize the ability to adapt, right? Our ability to identify a felt need, put ourselves within the shoes of that person in that context, and figure out the outcome that we're looking to do. So for larger companies, I think the same applies. But I also think you have so many cooks in the kitchen. How do you decide who's right? Right. And so I think, again, it comes into being willing to adapt, being willing to yield, and being willing to look at things that there is no right one way to do something, but that we have all of these different cultural values and skills and attitudes that help us to figure out the right direction that we're going to. So as people work towards digital transformation within their organizations and within their companies, well, okay, how do we create the conditions for a sustainable outcome within our organization? One of the topics has become AI agents. How do we have or employ and deploy AI workforce, right? How do we work together with that workforce? How do we ensure that and guarantee that it's going to produce the outcome that we're looking for with accuracy, that it's not going to create some scandal, which unfortunately we've seen with different companies that have kind of led into or leaned into the speed of producing an outcome with artificial intelligence and creating companionship with these AI chatbots and with these AI agents and things like that. So, I think when we talk about having, and I think so many people, so many organizations and institutions are still at, what is AI? How do I use AI? How do I use it to make more money? How do I use it in order to, improve my business? Artificial intelligence, depending on what you're using, is probably going to take you down a feedback loop. And if you're talking to the same group of people, over time, and you're not offering new perspectives within that space, well, then you're going to have data that unfortunately is not going to grow out of this feedback loop unless you spark it with something that's going to allow it to grow out of that feedback loop. And the same holds true in our communities, in our cultural constructs, in our context when we're operating. It's like very easy to believe that you're right. And I'll stop there.
Totally. Like, I think that we need to add new perspective all the time, as you mentioned, because that's the way to keep improving over time. And actually, we have a question from Karim McKilkin. What will be the best course for a classroom teacher? What do you think, Andrea?
By best course, I think he's talking about Silicon Valley Certification Hub. Are you talking about that, Kareem? But if not, I think a good place for you to start is looking at UNESCO, which has these different resource materials for educators on how to really use AI in the classroom and create that context, for what kind of skills that students need in order to be able to be successful in an AI mediated society, in an AI, highly AI driven world, it seems at this time. And that's only specific to certain areas in the world, right? It's not true for every part of the world yet. And so I recommend taking a look at UNESCO, and depending where you are in the world, you may also want to look at Digital Promise. They have different skills, different materials that are available as well for educators in order to implement artificial intelligence in the classroom. So as I started with this particular webinar, one of the focuses had been on identifying artificial intelligence as a computer, with a database of information that helps to produce an outcome, that helps provide the opportunity to adapt, right? Artificial intelligence is the adaptability. And I think when we focus on kind of what those needs are for our students, some of the critical needs are soft skills, and other needs are also include critical thinking. And so with those two thoughts, decide the outcome that you want to have with your students in your class, and then figure out what tools that you use with artificial intelligence that are going to allow you to achieve that outcome. And I hope that answered your question.
Continuing with keeping up with this topic about education, like, how do you see, like you mentioned, soft skills and critical thinking for the students, right? But I'm thinking about the teachers, what how do you see, what are the skills that the teachers should start develop, like what skills should they have nowadays with the use of artificial intelligence versus the past? Or what do you see as your recommendations for that?
What I have found is avoidance or uncertainty avoidance, which is also an element of CQ, for not being able to understand what we don't know, and so if I ignore it, maybe it'll just go away, or I'll get some guidance that's going to allow me to implement this in my classroom better, and let's take it back to, what is it? The diffusions of innovations model. It took 50 years for electricity to be adapted, to scale, and even then we still have places in the world that don't have electricity, and so, in this way, with the speed and the rate of technology and connectivity and the effort that's being put in by, large companies, satellite companies, we have a faster, rate of acceptance and use within this way. So it depends on where you are in the world and where you are in your thought process in relation to artificial intelligence. And I think that's the purpose of CQ, is being able to identify maybe that dependency, where are we, right? So I would say in New York, where I'm based in the United States, it has been identified that artificial intelligence will impact the workforce. We do have, a set of particular guidelines that focuses on, kind of the portrait of a graduate within New York State that helps us identify these key areas that allow, students to become a whole person. So if we are still looking to create a whole person through education, and we're utilizing artificial intelligence to do that, I think one of the ways is to make sure that we can still connect with each other um, in ways that allow us to have healthy debate. So I think using artificial intelligence to create healthy debate dialogues, right? Allowing artificial intelligence to become a collaboration partner, but not to siphon off human relationships. One of the places, or one of the kind of themes that I have seen, in relation to education and what's going on in the world, is that students are choosing to self-select out of having human relationships. And this is true for adults as well, because they don't have to experience confrontation. And confrontation is, part of a healthy way of life, not, negative or toxic, confrontation. So when we talk about skills and skills development, we think this applies across the board. People need to have the ability to think for themselves and to understand the context that's driving something that they're experiencing. And so when we're focusing on raising whole children, what we need to do is make sure they have the ability to connect with people, the ability to speak and engage with humans, and the ability to have computational thinking, which is kind of maybe not as subject to interpretation. It has to be specific and direct communication, which is another, value of cultural intelligence. There's much more to say about that, but I will stop there.
Okay, I mean, good. Totally agree with all those skills that are new and so relevant nowadays for education. And about that, by the way, like Jason Raymond shared the link for your TED Talk.
Thank you,
Uh,
Jason.
yeah, thank you so much.
So Jason's actually from the Center for AI and Digital Policy, which is really fantastic. So thank you so much, Jason.
Amazing. And also, by the way, he shared a great framework about AI competencies for teachers. So thank you so much, Jason. Good. So maybe we have time for another question. So overall, what do you think are the most common cultural blind spots that leaders have when they are trying to deploy AI or they want to try new technologies? Like, there is a hot mess there. I-
It leaves me with shock, awe, and wonder, truthfully, because I went to this incredible event about a month ago, and I heard an executive from a major fintech company say, AI isn't really such a big deal. I don't understand why people are making, this big stink. I don't think it's really going to change the way we do things. And I thought to myself, is she out of her mind? Because, you know, first, I think people like to minimize things they don't understand, and I think that is a major blind spot in the space of any executive who is leading a major company. I think, what is it, Dale Carnegie, who says we should have childlike wonder? Please don't quote me, because maybe I could be wrong with who that says, but childlike wonder, I think, is a great value that people can have, when we're talking about leadership at major organizations. Because the thing is, though this has been created over time, the reality is we're still unsure about what it can do. So no one can say anything definitely about what the outcome is going to be, but we have projections, we have estimations, we have some data over time that has pointed unfavorably in the direction of human disconnection and isolation, and also the implications economically for what will happen if we, phase out humans and only have artificial intelligence automating the work that we get to do. But we get to drive all of those outcomes by making human-centered decisions and choices, and being culturally intelligent, in those decisions and choices when we make decisions within our organization. So, as far as those major blind spots go, the blind spot is, it's no big deal. It's these minimizing ideas there isn't going to be some change. It's like people saying, things will be the same. And it's just this woeful, blissful ignorance of, I refuse to change. And so therefore, if I refuse to change, then, neither does our company structure. But unfortunately, everything will change. And you're either a proactive leader in leading that change, or you're a reactive leader in leading that change.
Perfect. Yeah. Uh,
Lots to
I
think
agree.
about.
By the way, do you have just to finish with cultural intelligence? By the way,
Hmm.
uh, how do you see like where like somebody from some executive, like usually
Hmm.
like the audience, there's a lot of executives, founders, if they want to start with this approach, with
Hmm.
this with cultural intelligence for their companies, what do you think are the first steps that they should follow, or to do, or to think about, to do it on the right way? What are your recommendations
I
here?
mean, the first recommendation is work with me. Work with
Yeah, for sure.
Silicon Valley Certification Hub. But the truth is, take 30 minutes a day and learn about artificial intelligence. Learn about what it means for you in your life. Learn about what it means for your company. Learn about, why a failure to pivot and to make decisions that help to, kind of embrace what artificial intelligence is a blind spot. And also be contextually relevant and culturally intelligent in making those decisions. And so get yourself trained on cultural intelligence, get yourself trained on what the implications of artificial intelligence, if it isn't monitored and done ethically, because it will matter. And get yourself trained on, kind of maybe what the possibilities are for tactically approaching artificial intelligence in a really proactive way. And by training your teams on how to do that. This is not an individualized experience. This is a collective effort where people are either going to self-select and learn what they want is only interesting to them, how to make more money, right, with artificial intelligence, or how we can collectively work together to systematically make changes within our companies, within the world, or within anything that's good for our community at large.
Perfect. And where they can find you if you have I don't know where, how we can find you?
Yes. The best place to connect with me is LinkedIn. Certainly, thecommonplace.co is another place. All of my websites are deeply in need of updating. And so for that, I don't feel great. But, if you want to have a conversation, please reach out to me at Andrea at drandreathomas.com, or perhaps find me on LinkedIn at Andrea E. Thomas, EDD. And the EDD I emphasize only because I'm not the only Andrea Thomas in the world. And so that's going to help you find me better.
Perfect. By the way, it doesn't appear here. I think that something with the connection, but is Leona Ba. She said, "Thank you so much for this. I'm wondering about how to address cultural biases in AI."
Mm-hmm. So there's a fair bit of context here. So how to address cultural biases? I mean, I think it takes 220 pieces of data to influence an outcome from artificial intelligence, and so I think it's your ability to sharpen the skill of being able to identify maybe what looks like a bias. But I mean, humans have bias, full stop, and because artificial intelligence has been designed by humans, it will have biases. So I think if you take a good look at CQ and look at these, very clearly articulated ways that we have the values that we have, you'll be able to identify them differently. So, for example, if you're, using perhaps a large language model and you want to clearly articulate an outcome, you'll put that cultural strategy in there. But how to identify cultural bias is too broad to answer, unfortunately, in this particular moment. So thank you for that question. But I do recommend that if you take each value proposition of CQ and look at that, maybe you'll start to strengthen the skills and be able to articulate those skills to people who also need to learn from that as well.
Perfect. Well, I think with this great recommendation and with your you know, like everybody, please reach out. Andrea, she's amazing. She's an expert. She can help your business to make it right, to deploy AI like in the right way. She is like really good and really nice as well. So thank you, everybody, and all the audience. Thank you, Andrea, Thomas, for your time, for preparing this amazing presentation and having this great conversation.
Thank you so much for the opportunity to be here, and I look forward to what's to come.
For sure, we will have a lot of things coming. And yeah, thank you so much, Andrea, and thank you, everybody. See you, I think, next year with more webinars. And uh, also, we will invite again Andrea for future to go deeper into this topic.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.